Hello, welcome to our Wednesday reading skills lesson. We are getting down there. We're on number 4 of 6. Today we are talking about questioning. So, why do we need to learn about questioning? Questioning is the main skill that takes you from a passive reader to an active reader. Which means basically, if you're a passive reader, you're just sort of reading the text. You're not really getting much out of it. Like you can pronounce the words in your head, you can read the sentences, but you're not necessarily paying attention to what you're reading. You're not comprehending some things. Whereas if you're an active reader, you're constantly asking questions. And I'm not talking about predicting questions. We're going to talk about them next week. So, for now, we're not going to worry about questions that are predicting what's going to happen. Think about just what you've read up to this point. And for those of you who haven't started the book yet or haven't read much of the book yet, it doesn't matter. This is for any book you read, anything you read at all, really. You need to be able to ask questions while you're reading and after you're reading. So, the ones that you ask during your reading are going to be more of, like I said, comprehension questions and questions that connect you to your text, connect you to the book. Afterwards, you might think of questions that help you analyze what you read. A lot of times, those are the questions you see on tests. Questions that you can be asking yourself when you get done reading something, and then you'll be ready for that if that question pops up on the test. So what kind of questions do we ask? It's a hard thing to really put into an explicit lesson because it does become just a habit and you can't turn it off and you're not really aware that you're doing it most of the time. But a good reminder to me that questioning is happening is when I see a movie with my parents. I don't know if you've had this experience. Maybe you're not quite old enough to have the embarrassment of your parents yet. But my parents are always saying, "Who's that? What are they doing? What do they want?" And I tell them, "Good questions. We're going to watch the movie and find out together." you can't ask those questions out loud or it becomes annoying, right? Like everyone around you is like, "Shut up." But you should be asking those questions in your head. So when a new character appears, oh, who is this? Where'd they come from? What do they want? Are they going to be a main character? Are they going to be a short-time character? Like, what's going on with this new character? Same thing with new themes, new concepts. Something like a concept, something, an idea that comes up in the book that you're not really familiar with. You would ask questions about in your head. Okay, what is this concept? I've never heard of this before. Let's see if we can figure out what it is. Just like you would if you're trying to figure out what a word means by using context clues. You can use context clues to answer your questions as well. So, what are some questions that are good to ask while you're reading? Well, there are questions that you would ask of the book. So things like the plot and the characters, like I was just saying, where did that character come from? What do they want? And the plot as well. Where's this going? What caused this to happen? Was this the effect of that I read yesterday? Those sorts of questions are questions of the book, questions of the text. And you can also question the author. So what did the author want to get across with this scene? Why did the character do this? But you can make it to the author as well. Why did the author have the character do this? What purpose did they have for writing? Like, what made them want to write this book? What choices did they make about language? Is it formal language? Is it informal language? And why? Genre. What genre did they choose, and why did they think this story would work best in that genre? You can also ask sort of, I guess these are more the analysis questions that you would ask afterwards. Things like, okay, whose point of view is this happening from? And Dracula is a great book for that because it's all written in letters and diaries. So it's going to be different people who you're viewing the world through. So if, the beginning is mostly Jonathan Harker, but once he gets back to England, then there's Mina and Lucy and Van Helsing and the whole gang of characters in England, and we get to see things from their points of view. So asking yourself, whose point of view is this? And then ask the question of the author as well. Okay, author, what is your point of view? What is your view of the world, I guess? And why are you choosing this way to communicate it? Or how is the book showing me what the author's view of the world is like? That would be a great question. Sometimes you want to ask about the opinions and values that are among the characters, but that are also maybe behind the author as well, but also your own. You want to be very aware of the questions you need to ask yourself while you're reading. And we'll talk more about that in the coming weeks. But you do want to be asking things of yourself. A big one being, do I understand this? Why not? Why am I blocked on this chapter or whatever? You can ask those sorts of questions as well. Oh, yeah. Don't forget that as a reader, again, it's not passive. Reading is an active. It's an activity, right? It's a verb, reading. It's something you do. It's not something you just sort of sit there and... Like watching TV is pretty passive. You don't have to do anything to make the images appear except turn the thing on. So, reading a book is more active because you have to make the visualizations in your head. You have to ask these questions of yourself. You have to be summarizing as you go, especially when you come across chapters or passages that you don't understand. You're going to be... You're going to be summarizing, okay, what happened last chapter. And that's why we went over some of the summarizing skills. Remember, we don't want it to be terribly long, right? Like a summary should be short and have just the important details in it, no opinions. So that's something that you do as you're reading. That's another way of questioning the text, questioning yourself. Okay? I think that's it. I do want to close with a quote from Madeleine L'Engle. I don't know if any of you have heard of her. She wrote, her most famous book was A Wrinkle in Time. But there's a whole series of those, and she wrote all kinds of other stuff as well. But she said readers sometimes grossly underestimate their own importance. Sometimes readers don't think that they're important to the process. But it's like that old saying, if a tree falls in the woods and no one is there to hear it, does it actually make a noise? If the book sits on your shelf, does it do what it's supposed to be doing? It takes you taking it off and reading it to actually bring the circle all the way around, and then the book can come alive in the way that the author intended. So the reader is just as important as the author when you are trying to make sense of the book. You're going to come at it from your point of view, but you're going to be asking these questions to always be aware that the author's point of view might be very different. The author may have left out a lot of things that you would have put in, maybe because they're coming from a place of privilege, or they're coming from a society that's very misogynistic or racist or whatever. In the past, like when this book was written, a lot of that stuff showed up in books. So you want to be, comparing your ideas, your values with the ones in the book and the ones that you can assume or infer that the author is holding. Okay, so don't forget, reading is just as important as writing when it comes to a book. If you don't read it, it's not doing what it's supposed to do. So, with that, we're going to sign off, and I hope you have a great day.